Hello everyone, my name is Sahib Talwar, and today we'll be analyzing this study performed by Fahad Ma titled Investigating the Effect of H. pylori Eradication upon Blood Sugar in Type 2 Diabetes Patients. Helicobacter pylori, also known as H. pylori, is a disease affected by several people worldwide that affects the stomach lining, and it leads to chronic gastritis and sometimes even inflammation of the whole body. And type 2 diabetes, on the other hand, is the dysregulation of blood glucose levels. And when mismanaged, it can compromise immunity, which is how H. pylori can be contracted. The problem statement and what the researchers are trying to understand within this study is the influence of H. pylori eradication upon glucose levels in the body. And the hypothesis that researchers developed here was that H. pylori eradication does indeed improve the glucose levels within our blood. And the null hypothesis states that there is no improvement upon blood glucose levels in our blood when H. pylori is eradicated. Now, the methods used within this experiment was that it was a cause and effect experiment where we had 61 diabetic patients that had H. pylori, and they were treated using BMTO, which is bismuth metronidazole tetracycline omeprazole, and they had that treatment for 2 weeks. And within a 2-month period, their lifestyles remained unchanged, and they had regular exercise, regular eating habits. And after 2 months, they had a UBT test performed, which is a urea breath test, which tests for eradication of H. pylori. And the H. pylori was indeed eradicated. And HbA1c levels, which measures the glucose levels in our blood, was measured once before eradication of H. pylori and once afterwards. And this table demonstrates the demographics of the 61 patients used in the study. And out of the 61 patients, the age between them was 34 to 58 years old. 63.9% of them were females, 36.1% were males, and 18% of them smoked. And out of that, 14.7% of the patients had hypertension. And this table demonstrates the average HbA1c levels before treatment and after treatment. The average before treatment was 8.6, and after treatment, it was 7.9. This determines a 0.7% decrease between the time before the treatment and after the treatment. And researchers identified a p-value of 0.05, where a p-value describes the probability of H. pylori eradication regulating blood sugar levels, and that it's just statistically significant if it is less than 0.05. And here it was less than 0.05, telling us that this is a statistically significant relationship between H. pylori eradication and glucose levels being monitored. And this table shows, instead of 61 participants, it instead shows 43 participants because the other 18 patients had different reasons of not being in the study, whether it be they didn't respond to a callback or they just weren't selected for further follow-ups of the study. And so after 1 month, the 43 patients observed had um, lowered values, had a lowered average value of HbA1c, and same for the mean of FBG, which is fasting blood glucose levels. There was a decreased average level of that as well. And here you can see there is a t-value, and the t-value determines whether the observed change is stronger than that of the possible variability that could cause this lowering of HbA1c and FBG. And a larger t-value, like the ones that we have here, 2.863 and 6.984 for FBG, state that the likelihood of random variation is less, meaning that there is a statistical significance between HbA1c levels and glucose lowering. And is of H. pylori eradication and glucose lowering. And so here you can see that after 1 month, the HbA1c levels had decreased by 0.77%, and fasting glucose levels decreased by 0.23%. The p-values here had also, you can see that the p-values are still quite low, which means that they're both below 0.05, which again supports our idea that it is a statistical significance between the relationship of H. pylori eradication and glucose levels being regulated. Now, this is within our study, there were some cytokines that were released, which are inflammatory markers, such as IL-1, IL-6, and TNF. These were released within as the H. pylori had developed throughout the body. And there's a chart here which goes through the process of this, of how the TNF, IL-6, and IL-1 were released. First, H. pylori infects the stomach, and then the stomach becomes inflamed. Afterwards, the inflammatory signals, the cytokines, increase. So IL-1, IL-6, and TNF begin getting released into the blood system. And inflammation spreads throughout the whole body. And insulin works less and less because the insulin starts forming a resistance because they can't get released, and the insulin markers get blocked because of the cytokines increasing. And blood sugar rises, and therefore HbA1c levels also rise. But that is just this was not something that was actually studied within this investigation, but it is the underlying thing, the underlying process that happened. Um, what we do identify from this study is that HbA1c levels did decrease, and that answers the researchers' hypothesis that denies the null hypothesis that there was indeed a significant statistical significance between glucose levels and HbA1c eradication. Conclusion, there was a 70.5% success rate within the treatment, and HbA1c's levels significantly did decrease, as you saw in the previous slides, and fasting glucose levels also decreased. This overall, the H. pylori eradication did increase and that did make the management of glucose levels better within diabetes patients, and then larger studies still need to be done because there was no untreated comparison group. So in the future, that is something that researchers are wanting to do. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Dr. Byfield, for giving me this opportunity to perform research. I thoroughly enjoyed doing it during this class, and I look forward to doing it in the part 2 class of this course. And thank you for everyone who listened. Thank you for my peers for listening and for giving me your advice and helping me along the way throughout this journey. Thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you. Bye.